Hey, what's up, guys? Chris here, and I'm back with another video. Also, if you're new to my channel, welcome, and also if you've been subscribed for a while, welcome back. So, the new video, as you read by the title there. So, now, as the majority of you all know this, that I was abducted by aliens when I was 12 years old. So, it's time for the follow-up story now. This follow-up story. So, the location where this actually had happened was in a mobile home trailer at the time that was a rental property around that time. And so, like I said, I lived there for about several more years after that had happened. But I had lived there maybe another 2 or 3 years after that experience. And then I actually did end up moving out of there. I moved extremely far away. So, and then that mobile home, after that experience, after I had finally moved out, that mobile home had sat there, I want to say, at least another 20 years or so. But that was after I, moved out. It still had sat there for literally another 20 years. And different people had lived there since. And I don't think none of them weren't aware of what actually happened at one point while I was living there, actually. So, when I had moved out of there, and that place was still sitting there, I know that place had still sat there because every so often I would literally just drive by and the place would literally just still be there. But one day, about, I want to say several months ago, I drove by there one day and the place was gone. It wasn't even there anymore. It's just very overgrown nowadays. So that's the follow-up story part of that. Now, there is a little more to this, actually. So, when I was literally had that experience when I was actually abducted by those aliens when I was 12 years old, like I had said, at that particular property, there was a blue light in the sky that literally had stayed still, I mind you. Completely still. I didn't think nothing of it. But the funny thing is, though, the day started out like any other normal day. And then later that night, I had saw that blue light and it was still in the sky, like just staying still when I had seen it. And then I seen it again slightly after that. It was still staying still. So I was just thinking to myself, wow, that's awful strange. I didn't think nothing of it at first. And I'm like, okay, well, that's just standing still. Okay, that's fine. Whatever. Stay still. I mean, I don't see, why exactly having that happen. Because at first, I thought, oh, maybe it's just staying still. Nothing's going to happen. Oh, something happened, all right. So, needless to say, there was that blue light, actually. So, needless to say, with that whole big blue light that stood completely still, when the whole abduction had happened, they ended up, this stone, they ended up embedding it about this deep into my foot. Into my big toe, I mind you. The big toe, one that's like that freaking big. Yeah. That was embedded so deep, that thing hurt the next day, my big toe. Literally was a pain in the padded ass to get out. But needless to say, it did end up coming out the next day, thank God. But oh boy, did it hurt until it was out. And then it finally felt better slightly after that. That's how that big blue stone ended up getting embedded into my foot, I mind you. But that whole ordeal was just horrible, horrible, horrible. But yeah. And yes, I did move several times slightly after that, after I moved out of that trailer. I mean, yeah, well, obviously I had moved multiple times slightly after that for different reasons. But the funny thing is, would I ever live there on that property again at that trailer? Hell no. I was literally just glad to be out of there when I finally moved out of there. But you know, every night around the same time in this trailer, I mind you, this mobile home trailer had one of those old electrical box or old electrical panel box things to where it had the circle kind of breakers on it, or like these circle ones that would just twist on or off or what the hell ever they're supposed to do. So anyway, I mind you, it had that for like a long time. So at the time, eventually, you know, we actually end up calling the landlord, and he was just like, oh, okay, yeah, you know, I'll take a look and see what's going on with it. He said, all right, tell you what, I'll call an electrician and, you know, I'll have him come over and we'll go from there. We'll update it with a brand new box with brand new breakers that are all electrical. I was like, okay, cool. So a brand new electrical panel box is installed, right? All brand new breakers were installed that were all updated. So, and they're, you know, so if the breaker, if anything happened, you know, like if it went off, you could just flick it back on or flip the switch there and the breaker would come back on or whatever. So, it's updated, all brand new. Everything's brand new. And all of a sudden, that night, everything in the bedroom shut off. Like, for no reason. And I was like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. So, you know, so I flipped the breaker back on, you know, for the bedroom. And nothing happened. Nothing in the bedroom would come back on. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. So I flipped it, you know, a couple more times, hoping it would work. Nope. That didn't do anything. And when this breaker would go off, that electrical panel would make this weird noise. And I was like, okay. So then, all of a sudden, you know, so we actually had the number for the electrician, you know, so we call, you know, because it happened a couple times within that first week it was installed. I said, okay. So needless to say, you know, we get a hold of him, we call him, you know, he comes over, he looks at it, he checks it. He said, huh, that's weird. He said, you know, everything looks fine. He said, yeah, we know, that's so strange. So he said, okay, tell you what, you know, I'll just replace the breakers with new ones again. Like, okay. I'm like, well, weren't they already brand new? Yep. He said, but, you know, I'll just replace them and we'll go from there. I was like, okay, you know, that sounds really good. So he does that. The electrical box panel, you know, everything in it checks out fine. Everything on it came back fine. So, later that night, lo and behold, it does it again. That's nice. I said, you gotta be kidding me. Again. I said, okay. So, I did it for the next couple of days. So, obviously, you know, we called him again. You know, so he looks at it. He comes out again. He looks at it, checks it, and this time everything's fine, including the breakers. So he was like, okay, the breakers are fine. Electrical panel box is fine. What could be the issue? I said, I don't know. So, needless to say, That was like the second or third time he was there. So he said, okay, you know what? I'll replace something else. He said, actually, you know what? I'll just put all brand new breakers in it and see if that does the trick. We were like, oh, okay, yeah, that'd be really great. That sounds fine. Okay. So he does that. Everything seemed fine. It seemed all good to go. Later that night, lo and behold, what's it going to do? Goes right off again. I said to myself, that's it. You've got to be fucking kidding me at this point, really? So, we end up calling him literally again, the next day. We call him, so he comes over, he swings by, he takes a look, checks it again. Breakers are fine. Electrical panel box is fine. So therefore, we had no clue what in the hell was going on with it. So later that night, all of a sudden, I said, oh, just wait for it. Oh, it'll go off. You'll hear the noise. This electrical panel box would not do that every time during the day when the electrician would stop over to come over to look at it to fix it. I found that strange. So then, all of a sudden later that night, it goes off. And I said, you gotta be kidding me. So I flicked them back on, hoping it's going to work. It would not work until the next morning. So I tried again that morning. All of a sudden, I flicked the breakers on for that bedroom because that's where the electrical panel box was. So I do that, flick them back on for the bedroom. Everything in the bedroom comes back on. I said, that is so weird. It would not work that night. I said, huh. So it only runs it during the day until a certain time at night, and then it has to shut off? Okay. That's odd, but whatever. So finally, I was like, you know what? That's it. Time to move out of here. I'm not dealing with this anymore because I'm literally pissed at this point. I was already so pissed at that point. I just took one look around one day. I was like, you know what? I'm going to pack up all my shit and get the fuck out of here. I said, because this is bullshit. Every fucking night, dealing with this shit. That fucking thing going off all the fucking time. And then refusing to come back on when it's convenient for it to work. So needless to say, I had all the shit packed. We had every fucking thing packed. So, so we get everything packed. So, everything's all packed, ready to go. I was like, you know what? Everything's packed. Let's get in the car. Let's go. We'll get the fuck up out of here. And never look back and return to this place. Once and for all. So, at the time, so we move. Because we had found another place that was for rent. So we move. And obviously, it was another mobile home trailer. A different one. So we move in there, and so the same time at night, although this mobile home, the electrical panel box was not actually in my bedroom this time, thank God. It was in one of the other bedrooms. And it was more, it had almost like a kitchen cabinet, built around it. And I was like, oh, okay. Interesting. So, nighttime, so finally nighttime rolls around, and I said, I happened to look at the time, and I said I think I said to my sibling at the time, I said to him, I said, you know what? I was like, hey, I was like, if we were in the other place right now, I guarantee you right now that electrical panel box would be going off. Now, when we had moved into a new place, we did not seem to have that problem at all. And the electrical box there would not do that, would not just shut off when it felt like it to have those issues. So therefore, we actually figured out what the problem was after we had moved out of there. So, come to find out, well, first of all, when we had moved in this place that we ended up moving out of eventually, so when we had moved in there, something seemed a little off. Like, even though we moved in there during the day, it literally, even with the lights on in there, it still literally seemed like it was dark in there. And I said, that's so weird. This place seems kind of dark. Huh. Interesting. Wow. Let's just say we later found out what that was all about, too. Oh, yeah. Living there, we found out a lot of things about that place. Although, I had some awful, horrible experiences in that place. That's actually one of the reasons why we ended up moving out of there. Well, that was part of the reason. There were others, but that's besides the point. But then when we had moved, we did not have one single problem. Or we also did not have to deal with any of those things after we had moved. That's why. 1, I find that strange. 2, you cannot tell me that that place did not have paranormal experiences happen there. It did. It was like all the damn time it would happen. It happened from the time we literally had moved in there until we moved out of there. But then again, then there were times where nothing would happen, and then other times stuff would happen, which was weird too. But then when we had moved, like I said, we didn't have any of this weird stuff happen when we moved, thank God. Nothing followed us, which was even better. Which we were actually surprised that nothing went wrong after we had moved out of there. But, now mind you, other people had lived there, and before we ever even had moved in there, and after we had moved out of there, other people had lived there. I mean, we don't know if they had any problems like that, like similar to what we did when we had lived there at the time. We really don't know what had happened after we had moved out of there. All I know is we had already moved out of there and really never bothered setting foot on that property again after all that. But the funny thing is, for some reason at the time, I think that old mobile home trailer at the time, that was a rental that we moved into when I was really young. And I mind you, I had to have been maybe about 7 or 8 years old when we had first moved in there. So, like I said, we had lived there from the time I was 7, literally up until the time I was about 14 or 15. And then we literally ended up moving out of there. So, yeah. I know, strange. But the funny thing is, though, that place, I literally think for some reason that before a mobile home was ever built or on that property and that land, I literally think at one time that might have been an old cemetery or something by the looks of things. So therefore, I think that old mobile home trailer that was there at the time was placed on that old property in that land that might have been an old cemetery. So therefore, that may explain some of the weird things that would often happen there. Oh, that's not the only thing that would happen there. The electrical panel issue. Nope. So one night, I'm in my bedroom watching TV. I can't remember what show was on at the time. Some kids show or something. And, so they just get... So the show's on for like 5 minutes, and I had my bedroom door slightly opened because I knew at any minute that I was going to have to get up and go to the bathroom. So that's why I left my bedroom door slightly open for that reason. That way I could open it the rest of the way to walk out of the bedroom and then walk over to the bathroom. So, needless to say. Oh yeah. That all happens. So, I have the door slightly open, and all of a sudden, I heard somebody say to me, "Turn off the TV." I'm looking around like, wait, what the fuck? Coming to find out, I'm looking around. I don't see anybody. And I'm like, that is so strange. Oh yeah. That happened there too. One night, randomly, out of the blue. Oh yeah. And then, sometimes, there would often be this really weird smell in there. Like, how would I say this? It wasn't overpowering. It's just a smell that would be there for like a few minutes. At least anywhere from, I want to say at least 5 minutes to maybe an hour. And then the smell would suddenly just go away. Now, the smell would only be in the living room area and in the bedroom. Now, you could not... It was a very, like I said, it wasn't an overpowering smell or anything like that. It was just this weird, some type of like chemical smell of like a really light chemical. But it was almost similar to a chemical smell that was like an unearthly smell. It wasn't like a rotten meat smell or anything like that. But exactly what the smell was it smelled like a chemical smell, like a cleaning chemical, and just something very unearthly. But it didn't have like a rotten smell to it or anything like that. It was just weird that the smell would only be in the living room and in my bedroom. Very seldom. It would just depend on the day, and then other times that smell would not be there at all. Now, I actually found that strange too. Oh yeah. That was another thing that would often happen there. These random ass weird things. But then again, this smell was also... Sometimes this smell could often smell like the chemical smell that I mentioned and the unearthly smell, but it wasn't like really bad or overpowering, actually. And then the mix of the smell would also smell like something sweet. Like you could smell a little bit of sweetness in it, like whatever it was. So I, to this day, do not know like what that smell actually was or is. But ever since moving out of there, I never had smelled that smell ever again. But for the life of me, I could never ever figure out what that smell there was. That smell was there like a little bit, even like the day we moved in. We didn't notice it right away. I want to say we probably noticed it like, I want to say like about 4 hours later after we had moved in there. Yeah, that. But it was, I'm telling you, it was honestly, literally the most strangest thing ever with that place. But then again, the relief, honestly, of that place was the day we got in the car and moved out of there once and for all. Thank God the relief finally happened after we moved out of there. I think I'm going to end the video here, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye.